The moment Stephanie's drone burst into flames and spiraled into the dirt like a dying UFO, I knew I had her. But it wasn't just about the drone. Oh no, Stephanie had cut the lock on a federally secured evidence container 3 weeks before that, thinking she was decluttering my yard. By the time she figured out what she'd done, I had the FAA, the sheriff, and 2 federal agents in my driveway. And they weren't here for me. Now, I get if this all sounds a little nuts. Like, how do you legally keep federal evidence in your barn? And how does someone just not notice that? Well, buckle in. Because Stephanie wasn't your average nosy neighbor. She was the HOA president of Willow Glen Preservia Place she treated like her personal fiefdom, complete with code enforcement fantasies and community beautification crusades. She even had lawn tape, binoculars, and a smug little clipboard. And me? I was the devil on her cul-de-sac. The final boss she never saw coming. My property sits just outside the HOA boundary. It's grandfathered in, meaning no dues, no rules, and most important line, Stephanie. Not that it stopped her. She considered my side of the fence an eyesore and treated me like a walking violation of the neighborhood harmony charter. Unfortunately for her blood pressure, what she saw most was the storage container behind my barn. Now, this wasn't some rusted dumpster or broken-down shipping crate with weeds growing around it. This was a climate-controlled, electronically sealed federal evidence locker. Unmarked to the casual eye, but certified by the Department of Justice. I'm ex-military, cleared to handle secure transfers for sensitive material. This part-time work. Pays well. Keeps me busy. That container? It held sealed narcotics, digital forensics backups, and ATF-tagged items waiting for trial. Not exactly junk. But to Stephanie, it was an unauthorized structure. A visual blight. A threat to her utopian landscape of vinyl siding and identical rose bushes. At first, she slipped HOA-branded letters into my mailbox. Remove large metal structure immediately, they read, in Comic Sans no less. Then came the passive-aggressive jabs at town meetings. Some of us value the aesthetic integrity of our community. She once brought a measuring tape to the edge of my driveway and claimed the container's shadow crossed her property line. I offered to adjust the sun. Eventually, she brought the HOA board into Iter tried to. They had as much authority over my property as a kid with a toy badge has over international waters. I showed them the deed, the exemption clause, and the DOJ contract. They backed off. Stephanie didn't. She escalated first with a drone, then with a camera in her Range Rover parked across from my gate like she was doing recon. She even walked the perimeter with a clipboard pretending to be an inspector. I asked if she wanted a tour. One involving a rake and poor decisions. But people like Stephanie think persistence equals power. And one weekend, while I was out of town transporting a sealed case to New Mexico, she made her move. She brought in the HOA handyman, some poor guy named Mike who looked more confused than complicit, and cut the chain on my container. Not just one. Both. She opened the doors, pulled out the boxes, laid everything on a tarp like she was hosting a yard sale, and snapped before and after photos for the HOA board. She thought she was cleaning up clutter. What she'd actually done was tamper with federal evidence bags of boxed narcotics, encrypted storage units, and a crate with a warning label from the ATF. And yes, I had every second on camera. Time-stamped, high-definition, top-down feed. She even smiled for a selfie in front of it. When I got back and saw the container open, the chains on the ground, and one of the sealed crates unlatched, my blood didn't boil, it detonated. I didn't knock on her door. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. I called my federal contact, filed a report, and emailed over the footage. Their response? Do not engage. Agents are en route. Don't tip her off. So I waited. I mowed the lawn. Trimmed the hedge. Stephanie strutted around like she just saved the HOA from urban decay. I overheard her bragging about finally cleaning up that junk heap to a neighbor. She even emailed the HOA board a slideshow. Titled it Restoring Curb Appeal. She really thought she'd done something noble. She had. Just not the way she expected. Which brings us to the drone. After the agents visited her, no sirens. No shouting. Just a quiet knock on her door. Stephanie got paranoid. Figured I had more to hide. So she bought a high-end drone. Top-tier stuff. Zoom lens. Night vision. GPS tracking. She started flying it over my property twice a day. Hovering. Circling. I told her that flying over private agricultural land without permission violated FAA code. I explained it plainly, even. She laughed. Said I was paranoid. Said her drone had enhanced stability and I should be grateful for the security presence. I said nothing. That evening I saw it coming, gliding over the trees, dipping low, doing a lazy figure eight above my barn. I waited. Then I raised my 12-gauge legal, by the way, for livestock protection and blew that drone out of the sky. It caught fire midair and came down trailing smoke, crashing into a wildflower patch with a metallic crunch. Stephanie came running, screaming like I'd shot her dog. She threatened to call the sheriff, so I invited him over. While she ranted outside, I served the sheriff coffee and showed him the footage off the drone of the container of everything. He whistled. She really stepped in it now, he muttered. But I wasn't done. The next day, the federal agents came back. And this time, they brought a warrant. Stephanie answered the door like she was hosting brunch. Smiling, polite. Then her face fell. They didn't yell. Didn't threaten. They just stepped inside and stayed for over an hour. She emerged pale and clutching a folder of paperwork. Didn't look at me. Didn't say a word. That night, her porch lights stayed on until 3 a.m. I saw her pacing in a robe, phone glued to her ear, probably trying to untangle herself from the web she'd spun. But it was too late. Her drone's GPS logs had been pulled. The FAA had opened a formal case. The evidence container breach was now under DOJ review. And her name? It was on everything. The registration forms, the invoice for the bolt cutters, the HOA's budget entry labeled Community Cleanup Project. Worse still, she'd signed every document under the HOA name, effectively dragging the entire board into it. She tried to spin the story, of course. Told neighbors I was storing contraband. Claimed the drone was part of a safety initiative. Even printed a glossy pamphlet titled Preserving Willow Glen with photos of my container labeled Illegal Structure. One neighbor sent me a copy anonymously. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the porch. But the board wasn't laughing. Turns out Stephanie had used HOA funds to pay Mike the handyman. She'd billed the drone as a security enhancement. And when the insurance company found out, they froze everything. Meanwhile, I kept to myself. Built a chicken coop. Planted wildflowers. Waved politely. Then came the kicker. Stephanie called an emergency board meeting in her living room. She served muffins, lemon water, had a PowerPoint presentation called Restoring Neighborhood Integrity. Someone filmed it, sent me the whole thing. There she was, pacing in front of her flat screen, presenting blurry photos of my barn like it was a CIA hideout. One slide showed a hand-drawn map titled Property Line Intrusion. She claimed I'd violated optical harmony. Yes, really. One board member asked if any of this was actually enforceable on land outside the HOA. Stephanie's answer? Legal boundaries are fluid. The room went silent. She ended the meeting by proposing a motion to censure me, file a restraining order, and report me for destruction of community property. Which meant the drone. The same drone the FAA had already deemed illegal surveillance. I got the paperwork the next day. Framed it. Right next to the cease and desist letter my attorney sent her that morning, along with a DOJ notice listing the statutes she'd violated. Titles, codes, penalties, the works. The FAA's response came next. Violations, fines, and possible charges for misuse of unmanned aerial vehicles. The wording was clinical. I just called it karma. A few days later, the feds returned, this time with more agents. They left with 3 laptops, a hard drive, and a box of files hidden under a tarp in her garage labeled Holiday Decorations. Stephanie stared at my barn for 20 minutes that night. Hands on her hips, rage in her posture. I waved again. The board had seen enough. They called a private vote, removed her as president, revoked her access to the accounts. She screamed about slander and legal action. Nobody flinched. One member asked if she needed a glass of water. The next day, I received a formal apology from the HOA. Not a threatened actual apology. They offered to cover the cost of any damage. I said I'd think about it. Then came the cherry on top. Stephanie filed a personal lawsuit against me. Emotional distress. Property damage. Harassment. My lawyer, Sam, laughed so hard he spilled his coffee. It's like throwing a cupcake at a tank, he said. We countersued, filed for dismissal, attached the full packet of evidence. Photos, videos, GPS logs, agent affidavits. At the hearing, the judge didn't even let her finish. If even a quarter of this is true, he said, you're lucky you're not in cuffs. She dropped the suit. Then came the final blow, a yellow placard on her door. County issued. Legal font. Pending legal action. Apparently, her remodeled home office had been built without permits. Wiring violations. Structural issues. And the kicker? She paid for it using HOA funds. Unapproved, of course. The insurance company was done. The board was bleeding members. Dues spiked. Residents revolted. Stephanie stopped leaving her house. Until one Saturday morning when a moving truck appeared. No waves. No cookies. Just two men loading boxes while she shouted orders from behind the screen door. And just like that, she was gone. The HOA returned to normal. Garden contests. Potlucks. No more newsletters about shrub height. Neighbors started waving again. One even brought me a pie. The story of Stephanie became a local legend. And me? I sit on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the breeze ripple through the wildflowers. Sometimes people ask if I'll ever join the board. I just smile. Nah, I say. I'm good. I already shot the drone.